I was born in South Africa in 1981. Apartheid, was the political regime of the time, in place from 1948 to 1944. Apartheid means separateness. In South Africa, we were segregated based on race. We were divided into groupings: black, white, colored, and Indian. If it was not clear which group you belonged to, purely by looking at the color of your skin, there were additional tests to determine this. One way was to measure the width of your nose. Another was to put a pencil in your hair to check if it fell out or stayed in. Can you imagine being checked for your blackness or whiteness? We were also further divided into two broad categories: whites and non-whites. A white minority, who were 10% of the population, oppressed the remaining 90%. As a child, I remember the public toilets. There were always two separate facilities. One door had a white female symbol on, and the other had a black female symbol on. One facility for whites, one facility for non-whites. This was to make it absolutely clear which toilet you were allowed to do your business in based on the color of your skin. But besides public facilities, there was also segregation when it came to housing, to education, to healthcare, to employment opportunities. There were even separate parliaments. White people had exclusive access to certain privileges and resources and infrastructure. My family and I were categorized into the racial group called colored, a group for all people of mixed origins. But there was a race hierarchy, and as colored people, we were not considered as inferior as black people, who were truly treated as subhuman. The legal system ensured that black South Africans were kept as far away from white South Africans as possible, unless white South Africans needed cheap labor. As a result, black children were deliberately undereducated to ensure that as adults, they were only ever able to do menial work. This does not sound okay, does it? My story today, however, is not about apartheid. I use South Africa as an extreme example of the worst of what can happen when cultures collide. South Africa came about as a result of migration. First, African tribes migrated south on the continent from about 500 AD. Then the Portuguese made their impact en route to the east in about the 15th century. Then came the Dutch colonists in the late 17th century, and then the British colonists in the 1800s. Collectively, the British colonists brought 65,000 slaves from India, from Indonesia, from Madagascar, and from other parts of Africa. My own DNA test reveals genetic origins from 12 different areas in the world. I would estimate that my ancestry comes from 50% of my ancestry comes from slaves and from low-paid servants. South Africa, also known as the Rainbow Nation, is one example of what happens when cultures collide. And around the world, we see many examples of countries where people are oppressed, not only because of race, but because of differences in religion, in culture, in gender, and in sexuality. Can you imagine, on a daily basis, living a life where every day you experience xenophobia, violence, extremism, radicalism, racism, and terrorism? What feelings are evoked in the room when I say these words? I wonder. Just by saying the words out loud, the feeling in the room can change. I imagine there may be unease, discomfort. I feel it myself. These assaults, these crimes, these actions against the other happen because there are people who seek power, superiority, and control over others. They control people by manipulating their vulnerabilities, their anxieties, and their deepest fears. They take advantage of these insecurities, and they play with people's toughest emotions. I'd like to use some different words now, and I'm curious to see if anything shifts in the room. I'd like you to imagine the world you want to live in. Is this world open-minded? Is it tolerant of difference? Is it innovative? Is it supportive? Is it nurturing? Is it caring? Is there trust? Is there respect? Is there fairness? Is there justice? Is there truthfulness? And is there compassion? What feelings do these words evoke? Different feelings, I imagine. Maybe there's warmth, joy, perhaps feelings of safety and security, perhaps a sense of being held while still being allowed freedom and growth. When human beings migrate, generally we are looking for a sense of security along with freedom and growth. And humans have always migrated. From the beginning of our existence, humans have migrated to seek out better living conditions and new experiences. I'm curious to see who's in the room today. Would you help me to check? Can you raise your hand if you're from South America? Yeah. From North America? From Africa? From the Middle East? From Asia? From Australasia? One hand. From all of Europe except Sweden? Wow. And last but not least, from Sweden. Wow, look at us. We truly live in a mixed society. I'm not surprised. Malmö has citizens from more than 170 countries. Some of us in the room today have immigrated by choice. Some people in the room have fled war-torn countries. The numbers of climate change refugees sitting in the room with us will only increase in the future. Us humans are always on the move. And when migration happens, cultures collide. And when cultures collide, fear can happen. So let's imagine for a certain number of people who've moved to a new country, life feels good. In certain aspects, the grass is greener. Perhaps there's less pollution, more nature, freedom of expression, more safety and security, a good future for your children. So we have the newcomers coming in saying, life is good here. And then, possibly, we have the locals, the natives saying, life is good here, and they're about to ruin it. They're taking our jobs. They're overcrowding our schools. They need to leave. Yes, when migration happens, fear can happen. And around the world today, we see how fear drives behavior. Fear of others and fear of difference creates exclusion, rejection, and often violence. But fear limits our experience. It narrows our world. As a psychotherapist, I'm deeply interested in fear, and I've observed how fear can be like a cage which can grip us and hold us. It prevents us from moving. It restricts us mentally and physically. Fear is a physiological response where your body prepares to protect itself from danger. Blood goes to your limbs, it leaves your organs, your heart starts pumping faster, your breathing becomes shallower. All of this ready to protect yourself from danger, to do anything to make you safe. But this is not an appropriate response to a new neighbor who's moved in next door, who looks different to you, whose cultural expressions might baffle you, who speaks a different language. Fear makes us lose access to our problem-solving skills, to our creativity, to our logic, to our reasoning, to our ability to think how other people might be feeling. All of this goes. We then start separating ourselves from others and labeling them. They are not the same as us. We are different to them. Naturally, as human beings, we all have our inherent prejudices, and we're not even aware of most of them. But the problem starts when we act on our prejudices. And this is where we benefit from being part of a society that tolerates difference, that values tolerance, and that works towards integration. I find Sweden a very respectful and trusting society. People here naturally seem to treat each other with mutual respect. I feel the high levels of trust here, and it means, in Sweden, as a mother, I let my 2 children, aged 6 and 8 years old, walk into the woods near our house, by themselves, to play, for hours. This is the childhood I want for my children. This is the world I want to live in. This is the feeling I want to live with. I have been transformed by moving to a new country. I speak to you today as an immigrant who has lived in 3 countries, in South Africa, in the UK, and now in Sweden. I exist because of migration, and I've become who I am today because of migration. Living in different countries has allowed me to let go of racial restrictions in my mind and limitations to what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. I've met so many different people from so many different countries and cultures, and embracing the diversity around me has allowed me to embrace my own diversity, to accept my brown skin and my curly hair. And we are all transformed by migration, not them, not the other, it's all of us, every one of us in the room today, every one of us in Malmö today, every one of us in Skåne, in Sweden, in Europe, in the world. We are all transformed. And because we can't avoid this transformation, we need to decide, in what way do I want to impact the we? And to create an impact, I suggest we tune into fear in ourselves and in others. Notice fear. Accept fear as a natural part of human existence. And then find ways to choose to access trust, respect, and compassion as antidotes to the fear. When humans move, when cultures meet, fear can lead us down a destructive path, or we can choose a different experience. We've seen the diversity in the room today. We are what happens when cultures collide. When cultures collide, I choose to live with the feeling that I feel right now. The feeling each of us chose when we came to spend the day thinking about and reflecting on transformation. It's a really lovely feeling. You've all brought something really special to the room today. So when we leave, let's find ways to hold this collective feeling, not just for the weekend, but for the long term. Let's find ways to grow this feeling into our communities. So what do we choose when cultures collide? We choose to spread this feeling into the ever-changing societies around us, and we choose to continue to embrace the richness and diversity that we all bring. Thank you.